Have you ever wondered how a simple act of kindness could turn into a terrifying ordeal? Let's delve into the chilling narrative of an unseen captivity that unfolded in the sun-soaked streets of Florida. Our tale begins with an encounter between two individuals, each with their own story. One, a woman struggling to survive, panhandling on the streets, and the other, a man named Walter Medina, seemingly eager to lend a helping hand. Medina, a man of 48 years, was no stranger to the darker side of the law. He had served time for a previous false imprisonment case, a detail that would ominously foreshadow the events to come. But at first glance, he appeared to be nothing more than a good Samaritan extending a hand to someone in need. The woman, whose identity remains protected, was at the mercy of the streets when she first met Medina. He initially presented himself as a beacon of hope in her life of hardship. Offering her food and narcotics, he seemed to be her respite, her refuge from the harsh realities of the world. But as is often the case, appearances can be deceiving. Beneath the veneer of helpfulness, Medina harbored a sinister intent. His acts of kindness were not born out of compassion but were a calculated ploy to gain the woman's trust, to draw her into his web. And unfortunately, she did fall into his trap, believing in his feigned benevolence. The food and narcotics he provided were not gifts of charity but tools of control, a means to keep her dependent, to keep her within his grasp. As his true nature emerged, the woman's situation rapidly transformed from a struggle for survival into a fight for her life. Little did she know that she would endure more than 2 months of brutality under the hands of this man, suffering severe injuries including broken ribs, deep puncture wounds, and extensive bruising. And all this began under the guise of a simple act of kindness. And so, under the guise of generosity, a trap was set. But what seemed like a helping hand turned into a horrifying nightmare. The woman, whose identity remains protected by the law enforcement, found herself trapped in a reign of terror, orchestrated by Walter Medina, a man she met during her most vulnerable time. Medina, it seemed, had a darker side. What began as a gesture of kindness, offering food and narcotics, took a sinister turn. He allegedly became violent, transforming from a benefactor to a tormentor. The woman found herself caught in a web of fear and abuse, her pleas for mercy falling on deaf ears. Over the course of 2 months, the woman was subjected to a horrifying ordeal of physical abuse. The extent of her injuries paints a chilling picture of the terror she lived through. Broken ribs, deep puncture wounds, and extensive bruising bore silent testimony to the relentless violence she endured. Day by day, the walls of her captivity seemed to close in around her, each moment a living nightmare. She was not just held against her will, but subjected to a campaign of terror that most of us couldn't even begin to comprehend. The conditions of her captivity were horrendous. Every day was a battle of survival, every breath a testament to her resilience. She was trapped, not just physically but mentally and emotionally as well, in a cycle of abuse and terror that seemed to have no end. Medina, it appeared, had no intention of letting her go. He had created a reign of terror, an oppressive regime under which the woman was forced to live. Her world had shrunk to the confines of her captivity, where fear was a constant companion and hope a distant memory. It's difficult to fathom the psychological torment she underwent, the constant dread of what each new day would bring, the isolation, the fear, the pain, the relentless, unending pain. The woman's life had turned into a never-ending cycle of abuse, each day bringing fresh horrors. But even in the face of such adversity, the human spirit often proves to be indomitable. The woman, despite the unimaginable horrors she was subjected to, held on to a glimmer of hope. Each day, she would wake up to another day of terror, but she refused to let it break her. Little did the victim know, her nightmare was far from over. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the reign of terror continued. But even in the darkest of times, there is always a flicker of hope, a promise of a new dawn. And it was this hope that would ultimately lead her to freedom. In the face of despair, hope often comes in the most unexpected forms. Picture a typical day at a local Walgreens pharmacy in the Tampa area. A woman, battered and bruised, is left briefly alone. This woman, who had been living through an unimaginable nightmare, sees her chance. This woman, who had been held captive for over 2 months, saw a glimmer of hope in the mundane setting of a pharmacy. Her captor, Walter Medina, had made a fatal mistake. He left her unattended for just a moment that she seized to change her fate. With every ounce of courage she could muster, she made her move. This was more than just an escape. It was a fight for survival, a fight for freedom. She didn't just run, she ran with a purpose, a determination that was fueled by 2 months of torture and fear. Her escape was not just a physical one, it was an emotional and psychological liberation. A call was made to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, reporting that an injured woman had just escaped from a van. The response was immediate. Deputies were dispatched swiftly to her aid. This woman, who had been living in unbearable conditions, was no longer alone. She was safe. The sheriff's office did not just respond to the call, they became her lifeline. They were there to protect and serve, and they did so with unwavering commitment. The sheriff, Chad Chronister, praised her bravery, expressing his relief that her tormentor's reign of terror was finally over. This woman, whose identity remains confidential, is a symbol of courage and resilience. Her escape was not just her own, it was an escape for every victim who has ever felt trapped, silenced, and powerless. Her story is a testament to the power of hope, the strength of the human spirit, and the bravery that lies within us all. In a moment of sheer bravery, her escape was successful. Every crime has its reckoning, and for Walter Medina, it was fast approaching. As the sun rose on Tuesday, the wheels of justice had started to turn in motion, and they were headed straight for Medina. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, armed with the knowledge of the woman's ordeal and Medina's whereabouts, initiated a pursuit. Medina, now the hunted, found himself on the run, attempting to evade the long arm of the law. But the officers, committed to their duty, were relentless. They knew what was at stake, the gravity of the crimes committed, and the need for justice to be served. The chase, filled with tension and anticipation, led officers through the streets of Tampa. It was a race against time, a battle of wills, a pursuit of justice. The officers, their hearts pounding, their senses heightened, were driven by their unwavering resolve to bring Medina to justice. Their dedication bore fruit when they finally cornered Medina. The chase had ended. The predator was now the prey, caught in the unforgiving glare of justice. As the handcuffs clicked into place, sealing his fate, Medina was taken into custody. The charges against him were severe and reflected the cruelty of his actions. Attempted second-degree murder and armed kidnapping were among the charges he faced. His past crimes, including a previous false imprisonment case, only added to the gravity of his current transgressions. Sheriff Chad Chronister, in his announcement of Medina's capture, declared, "This suspect's reign of violent terror is now over." His words echoed the sentiments of relief and justice that reverberated throughout the community. Medina's reign of violent terror was finally over. The nightmare had ended, but the story was far from over. The pursuit of justice had only just begun. The aftermath of such a terrifying ordeal is never easy to face. The victim, a woman whose identity we won't disclose out of respect for her privacy, was rushed to the hospital immediately after her daring escape. The medical team worked tirelessly to address her severe injuries, which included broken ribs, deep puncture wounds, and extensive bruising. Her path to recovery was not just physical. She faced an arduous emotional journey, grappling with the trauma of her months-long captivity. Meanwhile, the law enforcement machine was in full swing. Walter Medina, the man who had allegedly kept the woman captive, was now in custody. But his arrest was not the end of the story. Authorities were still untangling the web of his crimes, and more charges were soon to follow. Armed false imprisonment was one of these additional charges. This was not Medina's first encounter with such an accusation. He had served time for a similar case before, indicating a chilling pattern of behavior. Next came the charge of aggravated battery resulting in great bodily harm. The brutality of the victim's injuries bore witness to the severity of this crime. Medina had not just restrained the woman, he had allegedly subjected her to a campaign of violence that left her physically scarred. And the charges kept coming. Medina was also accused of tampering with a witness and tampering with physical evidence. These allegations suggested a calculated attempt to manipulate the course of justice, to distort the truth of his actions and escape the consequences. But the law was not easily fooled. Medina was already facing the prospect of a long prison term for attempted second-degree murder and armed kidnapping. The additional charges only added to the weight of his potential sentence, painting a grim picture of his future. Yet, in the midst of this darkness, there was a glimmer of hope. The victim, though deeply wounded, was alive. She was free. Her courage had saved her, and now she was embarking on the long road to recovery. She was no longer a captive, no longer a victim, but a survivor. With the suspect behind bars, the healing process had begun. The end of a nightmare often marks the beginning of a long road to recovery. Let's take a moment to look back and unravel the threads of this chilling story that unfolded in the heart of Florida. A story that began with a woman's captivity and ended with her daring escape and the subsequent arrest of her captor, Walter Medina. This tale paints a grim picture of a woman held captive for over 2 months by a man who had previously served time for false imprisonment. It's a tale of manipulation, where a seemingly harmless act of giving food and narcotics to a panhandler morphed into a reign of terror. The woman, whom we know only as a brave survivor, suffered severe injuries including broken ribs, deep puncture wounds and extensive bruising, all evidence of a horrifying ordeal, an ordeal that was nothing short of a living nightmare. Yet in the face of such adversity, her spirit refused to break. The woman seized her chance to flee when Medina momentarily left her unattended at a pharmacy. Imagine the surge of adrenaline, the fear mingling with hope as she made her escape, the relief washing over her as she found help. The nightmare was finally over, but the journey had just begun. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office sprang into action, demonstrating commendable efficiency and dedication. Their swift response led to a chase, culminating in the arrest of Medina. The suspect, now facing charges of attempted second-degree murder, armed kidnapping and more, will answer for his horrifying actions. His reign of violent terror, as Sheriff Chad Chronister put it, is finally over. The victim's bravery is an inspiration to us all. Her courage in escaping her captor and seeking help is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As she embarks on her journey towards healing and recovery, our thoughts are with her. This incident highlights the importance of community vigilance. It serves as a stark reminder that danger can lurk in the most unexpected places, and that our collective awareness and action can play a vital role in ensuring the safety of our communities. As we reflect on this harrowing tale, we are reminded of the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of staying vigilant in our communities.